The Hard Shoulder on Newstalk.
With Nissan Subscribe and Drive. No deposit, no compromise, no fuss. Find out more at nissan.ie.
To the Attorney General Paul Gallagher and his advice, his welcome advice, his timely advice to government that parties of up to 200 people are permitted outdoors. This advice fortuitously came after the news that Taoiseach Leo Varadkar was at a party of about 50 people organised by the former Minister Catherine Zappone. Owen O'Brien is Sinn Féin's housing spokesperson and he joins me now. Owen, did the Attorney General's comments, his advice, did it clear things up for you or add to the confusion?
Well, not only has the Attorney General added to the confusion, he's also created widespread anger, particularly among event organisers and restaurateurs. We were all very clear what the public health advice was up until the Attorney General's intervention, which was, if you were looking to book a meal, it was for a table of a small number of people. In fact, we understand from Bord Fáilte's own website, they were making it clear that large group bookings weren't possible. It was the same for weddings and other things. So for the Attorney General to come out and essentially provide political cover for the Taoiseach, who, again, keep in mind, had negotiated with industry the detail of the restrictions on outdoor dining, I have to say is absolutely appalling. And the fact that Leo Varadkar hasn't come out to answer questions on this is even more troubling.
Now, what defenders of Leo Varadkar and the Attorney General might say is he was just clarifying the situation as it has stood for some time, that Fáilte Ireland's recommendations and the Hotel Industry Federation and others, they had it wrong, actually, in not allowing groups of up to 200 people.
Well, if that's the case, I'm sure they're even more surprised. Keep in mind, all of the different sectors of industry would have had extensive engagement with their relative line departments and ministers as the easing from the lockdown restrictions were being agreed. And while, the Attorney General's legal advice is technically correct, public health guidelines had been agreed and circulated with industry. That made it very clear that if Owen O'Brien wanted to ring a restaurant and block book tables for 50, 100 or 200 people, that wasn't within the scope of the public health guidelines. So again, the fact that this is just being so-called clarified after it is revealed that the Taoiseach, the man engaging with the restaurant and hospitality sector on these things, attended such an event, I have to say, I think it brings the Attorney General's office in disrepute. And what I want to know is why the Taoiseach isn't out answering questions on your show and others so that he can explain this rather than have other people do it for him.
Well, it's not just the Taoiseach. If you're saying the Attorney General's office has been brought into disrepute, does the Attorney General need to explain himself?
Well, I'd like to hear from the Taoiseach, I have to say. And part of the difficulty in all of this is this is just the latest in a series of revelations over the last week, which kind of speaks about a particular culture of this government, where there's one set of rules for the people in this government and one set of rules for the rest of us. And that when somebody is caught stepping outside of those rules, goalposts change. And that's a feeling I'm hearing on the streets here in my own constituency and in Clondalkin and Lucan over the last week. So I think the Taoiseach has to explain how it is that while everybody else understands the public health guidelines to mean one thing, he and the organisers of this Catherine Zappone event in the main hotel had a completely different understanding. And it's only after they're caught attending such an event that the information about these new rules comes to light and is made public.
You're right. We haven't heard from the Taoiseach today. We haven't heard from government. There's not a single government minister, it appears, available for comment on any of these issues beyond releasing a couple of fairly bland statements. That's the best we can get. I mean, you're around politics much more than the rest of us and longer than a lot of us. Is there hope that this just blows over?
Well, clearly when Micheál Martin last week said that there was nothing to see here, move on with respect to the Catherine Zappone crony appointment, the government thought this was going to blow over, and it hasn't. And of course it hasn't because there was more to the story and those things have been further revealed. Clearly this is going to damage relations between the various government parties. Essentially, Micheál Martin has been exposed as not being in charge of this government, and I think he's ended up with probably as much egg on his face as Simon Coveney and Leo Varadkar and Catherine Zapone. But the real issue here is public confidence in the public health measures and advice from government is being undermined by the minute by these revelations. And therefore, government has to stop hiding. They have to stop avoiding questions. And they have to come out and make it clear what they did was wrong and it's not going to happen again.
Would you describe what the Catherine Zapone appointment as cronyism?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we have a public appointments process. It was put in place for a reason. And I sit on an Oireachtas committee where we've been dealing with legislation over the last couple of years, where we keep arguing with government that whenever there are appointments to new boards, for example, with the Land Development Agency, the legislation should explicitly say it should be the Public Appointment Service. Government ministers keep telling us, we don't need to do that because we use that appointment service anyway. The idea that anybody gets a job in government without having to apply, submit a CV, undertake an interview, and demonstrate that the best person for the job is unacceptable. And there's only one word for that in my book, and that's cronyism. We have a process for that. It should be used. And again, I have to say I was quite surprised that Catherine Zapone, having railed against such cronyism herself at an earlier point in her political career, to accept such an appointment when there was no process. I just think that's wrong, particularly when the rewards for the job in question were so lucrative. So I have to say, let's use the public appointments process and let's stop this behind closed doors, not in a wink appointment of people who are in or close to the party of government.
North of the border, that wouldn't happen, would it? There's no Sinn Féin insider in receipt of public funds?
What we argue north and south is we want the public appointments process and its equivalent in the north to be used and to be used properly. It's the best way to do it, and that's the way you ensure you get the best person for the job. But
there are not, so there's none. There's no Sinn Féin insiders who are out doing community work in receipt of public funds north of the border. That doesn't happen.
Anybody who I know, whether they're an advisor in Stormont or somebody employed in community sector employment on the ground, they applied for the job, they submit CVs and they undertake interviews, just like the people who work for me as a TD in the Oireachtas. But particularly at senior levels, like the idea that you just pick up the phone and offer a job, albeit a part-time job, but with a very significant remuneration to somebody who you're in cabinet with, that's not the right thing to do. We have a public appointments process in this state. Let's use it for all such public appointments.
Can I ask, Owen, before I let you go, just about another decision that's captured a lot of people's attention today, and it's the decision not to go ahead with the Electric Picnic Festival. And listen, Laois County Council found themselves caught between a rock and a hard place because they couldn't issue a licence based on the public health advice. But I suppose people are wondering, if the conditions are not right at the end of September, when are they ever going to be right? If every adult in the country who wants a vaccine will have had a vaccine, what was your reaction to the news?
Yeah, and I think the really frustrating thing for the events industry is not just this decision, but the fact that there isn't a pathway. They don't know when and against what metrics such events will be permissible. And I think that's really causing huge frustration. Like we're seeing a gradual opening up, for example, in sporting events. I was at the Leinster semi-final a couple of weeks ago in Croke Park. There was 18,000. Then last week at the Leinster final, there was 24,000. We understand that the future events, if all things go well, it'll be 40,000 plus. The events industry and live entertainment festivals have not been given that pathway. And in the absence of that, you're going to get these really disappointing decisions. So I think what the government needs to do is put in place that pathway, whether you're organising small music events, indoors or outdoors, or larger festivals. What is the timeline? What are the metrics against which things will be judged? So everybody can start planning.
Yeah.
To run a festival, particularly a festival the size of Electric Picnic, you normally need a year's planning in advance. And I've been talking to people in that industry over the last year, and what they've been saying to me is they're not dictating when they should be allowed open. They just want to know when and against what metrics.
Is that an indictment as much of government as it is, that the groups who represent people in that industry? There was no hope in hell that the hospitality industry lobby groups were going to let the government get away without a roadmap to reopen.
Well, for much of last year and early this year, the hospitality industry and the publicans would have made a similar complaint, but they didn't know what the roadmap was either. And you recall there was various false starts with the roadmap for indoor and outdoor restaurants and pubs.
But at least it always seemed to be on the agenda. The complaint that people in the arts and entertainment industry have is they're not on the agenda at all. That's how they feel.
And that is not the fault of the people in the industry. It is the fault of government. There have been a series of Dáil debates. I've participated in some of them. This matter has been subject of significant protest outside the Oireachtas. And I don't understand why there isn't a clear pathway. We're seeing, for example, in Scotland and England elsewhere, clear pathways, use of additional testing mechanisms like antigen testing, experiments, for example, with different ways of managing the crowd. What industry here has been saying for 18 months, talk us through and agree with us that pathway, so at least we know and we can plan. And not just the pathway, but the metrics against which various reopening decisions will be allowed. That hasn't been forthcoming for government, and the sooner it happens, the better for all of us.
All right, Owen. Well, Ryan O'Neill is on the line as well. Ryan is of Retro Drive-In Movies. And Ryan, to go back to that issue of the Attorney General's advice and that 200 people are allowed gather outdoors, am I right in thinking your drive-in movie service was told to close a little earlier this year? Is that right?
Hi, Kieran. Yeah, that's correct. We reopened late April. That was following the announcement by the Taoiseach to say that outdoor recreational premises could reopen from April 29th. So we planned our reopening. We were open for about 3 weeks, and then around about the 19th of May we got a call. We were due to do some concert screenings, some Bon Jovi concert screenings in Dublin and Cork. We got a call from the Garda station in Cork to say no, you're not actually allowed to operate. Now this came as a surprise to us because last year, just to bring it back to last year, Josepha Madigan and Simon Harris actually put a line in legislation that, like all other businesses, differentiated between your indoor cinema and our company, which does drive-in movies. Which meant that while cinemas were closed, the drive-in movies could continue to operate. That legal distinction remained in place right through 2020. We were operating right up until kind of New Year's Eve, and then we closed for the first part of this year during the level 5 restrictions. But yeah, we were told that we had to close. Now it's important to say that prior to us reopening on the 29th of April, we contacted many different government departments to try and get a defined list of what is a recreational premises, an outdoor recreational premises. We were told one didn't exist, and it was kind of up to us to decide for ourselves whether we fit into that category. Now, just looking back on the legislation, because what it prompted us to do yesterday when we got this notification or the press release from the Attorney General, we went back and we had a look at the actual wording of the legislation to see if that was the same as the guidelines that were being given. So, and if we go back to that legislation, which was just before we reopened on the 28th of April, the actual wording says relevant recreational premises is a premises that's used for outdoor recreation or outdoor exercise purposes, but does not include a fun fair, theme park, circus, campsite, caravan park or aquarium. So, it's very fair to assume that we would fit under that. We are a recreational premises, we're outdoor, and we're not listed in that list of exceptions. If you then go forward to the next legislation that was released on May the 9th, which is the one that was quoted yesterday by the Attorney General, it then starts to talk about relevant events that can take place. And it says that a person shall not organise or cause to be organised a relevant event in a relevant geographic location other than where the relevant event takes place entirely outdoors, and the person takes all reasonable steps to ensure that the person's attending doesn't exceed the number, which was 15 then, and then that increased to 100. So what that basically says is that gatherings like the one in the Merrion Hotel were permitted back as far as May the 9th, although the numbers increased after that. Yeah.
But Ryan, gatherings like the drive-in cinema were also permitted.
Yes, they were. The only reason we were told that we couldn't operate was because cinemas were listed as an exception. So they were saying, well, look, there's nothing about drive-in there. That line disappeared that said that drive-in cinemas could operate, that Josepha Madigan and Simon Harris put in last year. So what they're saying is, you're now a cinema, so you can open on the 7th of June. So that time in between where we were closed, we lost in excess of €50,000. But I suppose the most important thing about this is that the government advice on the 7th of June, and I checked the gov.ie website, said that outdoor services can resume with groups limited to 6 people. So that says that on the 7th of June. That's the guideline that's been given, but the actual legislation says no, you can actually have outdoor events up to 100 people outdoors, which It's just crazy.
So the legislation was allowing for one thing. The guidelines were telling you to do something else. In the meantime, you're closed down and you lose €50,000. And now, I suppose, Ryan, you realise that all you needed to do was invite Leo Varadkar along early on, and the Attorney General would have decided, oh, actually, you know what? Drive-in cinemas, they're fine.
Yeah, and we tried to get this clarity from lots of different places. We were told, look, you're a mass gathering, you're outdoors, even though, bear in mind, people stay in their cars. So we had put things in place where you stayed inside your car. So you didn't get out. We had our food all closed. It wasn't a case that people were congregating. So even if people had to get out to use the toilet, we were making sure that we were under that kind of 15 number that was been talked about for outdoor gatherings. But that shouldn't even come into it, because the wording of the legislation prior to that said that you could open up if you're a recreational premises, with the exception of fun fairs, theme park, circus, campsite or caravan park.
One rule for one rule for them, one rule for everyone else. Ryan, listen, we appreciate your time. Ryan O'Neill from Retro Drive-In Movies, and Owen O'Brien as well. We spoke to Sinn Féin's housing spokesperson. A lot of people texting in on this issue. 53106 is the number. I want to keep hearing those views. Other people texting in about maternity services and confirmation from the HSE just as we came on air. It was breaking news that all hospital groups are now fully compliant with the maternity hospital visiting guidelines, except James has just texted us to say this statement from the HSE is plain wrong. My niece is in labour as we speak and her husband has just been sent home. So there we are, the HSE continuing, it appears, to deny the lived experience of people listening to this show. James, thank you for that text. My suggestion might be the same as my suggestion to Ryan. Invite Leo Varadkar into a few maternity hospitals, and the Attorney General before long will turn around and say, actually, no such thing as restrictions. People can do as they want. Keep with us here on The Hard Shoulder. We're going to be back after this very quick break talking to Sonia O'Sullivan about Tokyo 2020.